Just be aware. So coming up next is the future of IT organizations in the cloud panel. We're ready to go, everybody that's sort of moving around. The next one is the future of IT organizations in the cloud panel. And I'm going to introduce the speakers for the next one. First up is, and if you can come at us, I call the names, Jarrett Appleby. He's the Chief Operating Officer of CoreSite, and he's responsible for the company's go-to-market activities, including sales, marketing, operations, engineering, and facilities. Then we have Peder Ulander. He's the VP of Product Marketing for Cloud Platforms for Citrix. And he's been a driving force in the private cloud technologies, spearheading the entry of Cloud.com into the market before it was acquired by Citrix and renamed CloudStack. I go way back with Peder. And Scott Sanchez, Director of Cloud Strategy for Rackspace. He's responsible for overall business and partner strategy for Rackspace. For Rackspace's private cloud powered by OpenStack. And once again, our moderator, James Staten. Please join me in welcoming everybody to the stage.
Great. So what I love about doing a panel about IT and its role in the cloud in front of a developer audience is there's nobody in IT here. We can talk bad about them, right? Maybe not. Okay. So well, let's talk about this. I mean, one of the topics that's been brought up all day and constantly talked about in cloud is DevOps. DevOps runs everything. That's the future. There really isn't a place for IT, right?
Right. We were talking about this earlier. Really interesting environment. We get to see, being a data center infrastructure guy, we get to see DevOps and traditional IT. And I tell the story this year in December, going to Gartner show. 1 week, it was AWS reInvent and all the innovation in DevOps. The next week was Gartner in the traditional IT world, literally in the same facility. And that's the collision. That's what we're really seeing is the innovation and the IT coming together. And that was really week to week, you could really see the transformation. So it's exciting times and a lot of impact to the organization. So.
Now, Peder, your organization has helped a lot of people set up clouds and operate clouds. So not just develop and deploy to them, but actually operate them. What do the operations side have to go through to actually get and operate cloud?
Well, so we're in a different space in the market. I mean, we've been fortunate in doing this for the last 3-4 years. The developers, back in the day, it was all about public clouds. It was Amazon, it was Rackspace, it was everybody out there that they could accept a credit card, go run the service, and everything was great. There were two sets of enterprise reaction to that, and I'm not saying don't do it, we're going to do it type of a thing. The two reactions we got were the ones that recognized that there was a new set of tools that made their developers more agile, and they were able to go really kind of innovate on the fly, and they wanted to bring that capability in-house so that they could empower their developers. And then we got the IT guys that were looking at the cloud model. Bechtel is a great example of this, where it was about control and privacy and what have you, to where they couldn't run in Amazon, but they liked the cloud operating model. And they still had some very specific needs that they had internally. And Gear specifically said, I want to take the model of reducing admins, reducing IT overhead, keeping the physical layer managed by the classic guys, but then opening up the virtual layer to really spark that innovation, optimization, et cetera. So I think we've learned over the last 4 years, it's about identifying key projects, empowering your developers to really do what they do best, and then give the tools and components that enable them to step into the cloud, not rewrite the whole thing from scratch, but embrace some of the legacy core technology, embrace the aspect of server hugging, but empowering the developers to go out and actually do their development.
But you mentioned something straight on and several times through that, which was empowering the developer, serving the developer. I don't know a lot of IT guys who think that way. And you've brought this up when we were talking before. What's the mentality you run into of IT, and what do they need to do to get to that point where they can feel like empowering?
So in some ways, there's this protectionism mindset of, I know this is going to be disruptive to me. It seems exciting, but it seems scary. So I'm willing to accept things like software-defined networking as long as I can control them. And the reality is that's the whole idea, is that you don't control them anymore. The developers are going to control them and move that up the stack. So it really is, and I agree with both of you guys that there's a collision that's happening here, and it is about helping the customer with the journey to get there, that you can start small, you can transition over time. This isn't a lift and shift 15, 20 years worth of IT investment and applications onto this new thing right away. But at some point, the people that influence the IT decision making in these organizations need to say, look, we're going to commit to cloud. We're going to do this, and it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel awkward. Bear with me. I think we all see where we're going, but it's a journey we all have to go on together.
Okay, so we've got the analogy of a collision that you've brought to us. Stephen from Microsoft brought up the analogy of goring oxes and putting blood all over the ground. I don't know that I want my dev team and my ops team pouring out blood on the ground. So how should they start? What's a safe way to start where they can actually start coming together and kumbaya is going to be at the end of the day? What do you think?
Well, for us, we've seen innovation with partners like that are here in the panel, but again, back to the AWS reInvent team, that innovation and the enablement of like a direct connect offering gives you the flexibility and performance you needed moving from a dev to a production environment. There are very few that are brave enough to go like Samsung, Richard this morning, to say, this is our grand vision, and that's high risk for a lot of folks moving to full production in that scale. So we're all along that. I liked Michael's early marks of what those movers are and where you are in the life cycle and where the company's risk profile is and where their comfort level is. But there are innovators that are blazing that trail, and we want to empower them. We want to bring this architectural shift. It's very exciting to see that. And we got to tell those stories, really getting folks comfortable with it. And I think take baby steps, so to speak, moving so you don't gore anyone or have that big collision, move them through the production. And the ones who are kind of breaking through, let's tell that story and what works and collaborate on those types of things.
James, we were at a session at the Computer History Museum. I'm paraphrasing and probably destroying your words, but the point you had made was that it was less than 5% of enterprises had actually gone down the path of really going cloud. Yeah. That's the reality of it. I think today it is a handful, right? It's probably in the hundreds to thousands of customers that have truly gone beyond a cloud in a corner and are looking at either can I move one workload here or can I go a little broader as far as it relates to private clouds. And I think all of us here on stage have a number of great customers that have made that leap. And the biggest thing that I think we've done is encourage customers to go to the communities, go to OpenStack, go to CloudStack, go to the various cloud computing facilities out there, because these customers will tell you their story. They'll tell you how they prioritized, why they went and made the decision, and how they overcame the disruption of IT ops and DevOps. Because at the end of the day, it is coming together, but I think most people are recognizing that it can't be blood on the floor coming together. It has to be one where there's a little give and take on both ends.
So one of the challenges I see with a lot of IT is they want the answer handed to them. Is that good enough?
You're expecting to buy your cloud in a shrink-wrap box and have it delivered at your loading dock and plug it in. I'll say you're delusional, right? It's not a product that you buy. It's a journey that you make. It's a commitment that you make as an organization, not just to a particular technology or group of technologies, but to the organizational change that really is required. What we're finding is that there are a growing number of these visionary CIOs and IT leaders and even business leaders in the companies that we're working with that are putting their careers on the line and betting on this. And then kind of bottom up, there's development groups that are making those same bets. And I think that the bottom up is the easier approach as vendors, because we're dealing with people that really get it, as opposed to people that are siloed and segmented that we're trying to blend together in some magical recipe that they're expecting us to deliver. But we don't believe there's any single shrink wrap thing you can deliver. What we try and do is give people really choice and kind of a portfolio of things and solutions that can help fit them into the journey where they're at and take them along. And we've made much of that same journey ourselves, from a dedicated hosting business to a virtualization business to a cloud provider. And we feel we're kind of uniquely positioned to help people make that same journey that we frankly struggled on but have become very good at.
So if I'm a typical IT operations professional in an enterprise, and I'm now been told by my CEO I must have a cloud, is this an evolution, or, as said before, is this a revolution? And how much so, Peder?
Yeah, so I've done a number of sessions where I actually say the last thing you need is a cloud strategy, right? You need an IT strategy and understand how cloud fits in. This is about identifying workloads, practices, public versus private, doing the full assessment of where you can operationalize your business to take advantage of the various benefits that you get from cloud, be it risk or control, or be it cost savings and what have you. And I think the first thing for any IT guy that is asked to, in fact, we've done this with a number of customers, when they're told, go do cloud, the first thing you should do, go look at your users. Because there's a high likelihood that they're already doing something on Amazon or some public cloud. You've found the use case. You've found the work style. You can, through open source communities or through commercial products, mirror that stuff internally and actually build up a successful initial implementation. And once that starts, that's where business starts to grow, because other businesses see the operational value. They see the dev satisfaction or things like that. I mean, Coles in Australia, actually the second largest retailer there. When I sat down with their CIO and IT director, when they had that was the exact discussion. We need a cloud strategy, and the answer was no, you don't. You need a cloud to fit certain needs in your business, and they specifically went out. They found the initial use case was, let's figure out what our devs are doing on Amazon. They built that. Today, they run their entire web front infrastructure on the private cloud because they recognized that they could not only do it and engage their developers, but it became an operating model for how they basically deliver their service to the market.
So you're saying it's an evolution from the public cloud. Does that
Sometimes.
mean it's not an evolution from VMware?
So that's a different use case. Right? So again, it goes back to figure out what your developers are doing and how are you doing it. We chatted about this earlier. We can all sit and talk about, all the great things that OpenStack is doing, all the great things that CloudStack is doing, all the great things that SDN brings to the market. And there are, yards upon yards of technical benefits that you can do. But at the end of the day, why does someone do SDN? So I don't have to run a VLAN. Why do I do cloud orchestration? So I don't have to spin up a VM. That's the reality of the IT guy, and some of these guys might be running on VMware. We made a strategic choice to say we're going to support dual workloads. The pure Amazon-style flat networks, raw compute, to complex networks running big vSphere type stuff, and automate some of those systems and give that cloud-like functionality. By no means would I say it's a definition of a cloud or not, but it gave the capabilities to the customer to deliver that service to the developers. It's, as we're moving up stack, it's now IT as a service. This layer becomes, and RightScale plays a huge part of this, becomes that broker. And the service comes from software, comes from infrastructure, comes from public, comes from private. The IT guys are the ones in the center of that storm that have to figure it all out.
Yeah, Scott?
So when you think about should we have a cloud strategy, I think the cloud strategy should be to do more faster for the business, right? How you do that, what technologies, what vendors, what regions, public, private. You're going to make all kinds of choices depending on the business segment and the application and the need at the time and all of that, right? But I think a lot of, when we think about VMware versus the new way, VMware was sold as a cost-saving move, right? You had these boxes, they were 30% utilized. We can make them 95% utilized and make it easier to do maintenance and all these things, all these promises that were made, some of which came true, some of which we all know what actually happened.
I mean, they aren't running at 95%?
Hey, I don't know. So that's the old way. It was use this technology because it's cheaper. And when you think about cloud, and if your strategy is do more faster with cloud, right? Yeah. Innovate faster, move faster as a business. If you look 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how cloud has transformed the business, you should be spending a lot more. We talked about price per unit continuing to drop. Of course, it's going to continue to drop. More was a smart guy, right? We all realize that. But the cell phone analogy is great. 10 years ago, we all spent $50 a month on our cell phones, and they kind of didn't do a whole lot. Now, every leader in your company's got a $500 a month cell phone bill, and you couldn't imagine not paying for that, right? Cloud is the same way, right? Cost per minute on my phone, I don't even know, it's nothing. But I use a lot of them. And I use as many of them as I can and as much data as I can because it moves my business forward faster. Yeah. Cloud's the same way. That should be your strategy is what can we do, what technologies can we pick, what vendors can we pick to move forward faster and be spending more on all this stuff later, much less per unit, but more as a whole.
Well, let me get to one of the core concerns that I hear a lot, and you probably heard this because you were at the Gartner conference, and I hear that from that audience all day long, which is like, if I automate all this stuff, if I standardize and deliver it as a service, what do I do? I'm out of a job. Is that a real fear?
No, I think some skills, I think there is some reality to that. You got to evolve, and I think we are seeing that. But the innovation that continues, there's a similar dynamic, old enough to know that internet transformation and what that did to architecture. Folks moved on. There was a lot of innovation on the front end that kind of moved forward. And I think there are folks that got to transform on the IT side and adapt to this new world. So there is some of that really there if you can't adapt. So.
There's envy, I think, for developers, right? If you are an infrastructure engineer, if you're a hardware administrator, if you are people that are traditionally in those groups, in those roles, that the developers are the new kings and queens, and that's a problem if you don't consider yourself one of those people. And I think we talk about that journey and the transformation that companies have to make, and the staffing decisions and career development. That's how you get your people to be interested in this. Is that you show them that, okay, you used to do this in a console, now you're going to do this in a development environment, right? And it's different. And once they start to see that, I think people start to take a different stance.
So let's drill into that a little bit. Peder, I'm going to bring this one to you.
Okay.
Say I'm a storage administrator. I've already lost power in the company to the VMware guy. He now tells me, he's going to provision storage because VMware can now provision virtual storage. Now the cloud is telling me I'm just going to be a service, a commodity to the whole thing. It doesn't sound like I've got a career path I want to be on. Right. What is my career path? What should I be focusing on? So
you look at a lot of the analogies in the business. Just because the cell phone market took off didn't mean the telephony guy in the business lost his job. The same thing in the banks. It's not all completely automated. There still is. You got to have all of the back office and everything else that basically runs. And this kind of goes to that trend that we start to see, where IT is in a very interesting spot where rather than being a bottleneck, which is what a lot of people will say is the reason why cloud is growing, maybe the public cloud, IT has an opportunity to become a strategic weapon. And that doesn't necessarily mean jobs go away. In fact, it takes the guys that are doing things like provisioning VLANs, spinning up VMs, or applying a storage to a dev. It removes the remedial functions and actually gives them an opportunity to take bigger things. We talked about this in the back, that the trend that's happening in the enterprise today is there's a layer. You have the physical layer, and you know what? As cloud grows, it's not all commodity boxes. The big EMCs and the Ciscos and all the crazy, great devices that are out there in InfiniBand, it's not going away. People still need that underlying stuff, and as we see more production workloads put more stress on the system, you're going to need some of the resiliency, you're going to need some of the speed, you're going to need some of these pieces. Not for every app, but it's there. Then you have the virtual layer that's coming up, and the virtual layer is becoming more software-defined, more flexible, more portable, et cetera. And it's going to run on top of the physical, but be independent from the physical, so that you don't have VLANs. That's why there's SDN, right? That's why this is growing. You don't have to worry about all the VM locations and what have you. IT then becomes a service broker. They build systems that automate where do workloads run based on risk and reward. That could come from public clouds or private clouds. It could run on Xen Server, KVM, or VMware based on the risk profile, the cost profile, and what you're actually trying to go do. That's IT's new job. That's a huge job inside of an organization. And you know what? I'd rather do that than spin up a VM for a developer.
Okay, so I'm going to try to make it real on the networking side. So I'm a Cisco certified administrator. I live in iOS. Now this SDN thing is coming. What do I learn? What class do I take? What certification do I pursue?
No, I think there's a lot in terms of the SDN. We're right at that early day, so it's hard to it's upgrading your skills and understanding. Everyone's moving there to SDN environments. It is the enabler, and it's going to free folks up. I'm not sure of all the certification folks need today on the SDN, but that is ultimately the future, that freeing up that software-defined network capability. And that is what gets it out. The high-performance cloud, the networking at the edge, the upgrades from 10 gig to 100 gig enablement, the throughput that you're getting, the performance out of it. And that's what we're seeing, the community really embracing SDN. And I think that's really one of the key things that we're seeing. The internet scale, because the major players came together and said, we're going to cooperate, we're going to define products, we're going to exchange, and we're going to scale this thing for the benefits of everyone. And I think that's really what we're seeing with the SDN world and this multi-hybrid cloud environment. It's embracing that. I don't know the certifications that you need today on that.
We're in one of the only times in the history of IT so far where that person you described could actually shape the future of their own job by going and getting involved in the open communities that are developing around these things, right? And actually make a difference and steer where they'll be in 5 years as opposed to letting someone else tell them where they'll be. So I think that is one of the things that's exciting about what we're doing as a whole ecosystem, as a community, right? That software is the new hardware, and that person used to work on hardware. It's inevitable that at some point they're going to work in the software layer, and guess what? You can actually contribute and shape what that looks like.
Yeah, and I know that one of your customers that I spoke to actually went to the Rackspace certification class to learn OpenStack. And they were a VMware administrator to begin with. And they first came in and said, well, this is just going to be something new, like vCloud. Fine, I'll take this class. But when they left the class, they're like, oh my God, this is completely different than I thought. And I feel like if they don't take that step, proactively engaging in the cloud, they're never going to get there. And one of the challenges I run into all the time is, I don't think as an IT ops guy, you can ask your developer what the cloud is and get an answer that you could actually take action on. It feels more like you've got to know what administering a cloud or administering a cloud app might actually mean and actually be.
You know, to Scott's point, this is all happening in the open, right? I mean, you look at the leaders in the cloud. It is being built on the foundations of open source. We are leading. We are not replacing. We are not replicating. And as a result, whether it's software-defined networking, software-defined storage, cloud orchestration, DevOps, there's a community there that you can learn from. I think certification and things like that, those are absolutely critical, but don't wait to find the budget or to get the approval. Type something into your browser. Guess what? You're going to be able to join the community, learn from the customers that are doing it, and actually figure out how you can apply that to what you're trying to go accomplish.
Obviously, these guys don't want to hear all my questions. They're here to hear your questions. So what have we got? Go ahead.
I had one simple question. You as a vendor or an entity or an enterprise have a relationship with RightScale. I as a customer use RightScale to access your infrastructure and provide service to my users. What happens tomorrow if there is a break in relationship between you and RightScale?
Oh, that's interesting.
And you know what? Michael and Torsten are the kind of guys that are going to break every relationship out there. You know what? here's the good thing, right? This is about a community and teams that are growing. Michael and team, they're making money on OpenStack, they're making money on CloudStack, they're making money on VMware. And the best news is, if they don't like us, they can still go do it with the code that we've put out in the community and drive that. They're going to solve for your needs. We're going to solve for your needs. I think that's the benefit of open standards, open source, and open business, is that it removes that risk. There is no rift in a relationship. And I think, at the end of the day, as much as I might not like Bailey, I will still engage with him when he has a customer that has an issue with my stuff.
And so just to back that up, if that is a concern for you, if you feel that's a risk to your business, then sticking with the cloud platforms that are developed on open source technologies helps alleviate that concern, because then if a business relationship happens to go sour, the technology is still available to RightScale to be able to integrate into their platform. So,
other questions?
Do you guys think private cloud is mainstream for the foreseeable future, or is it a temporary kind of bridging technology, and in maybe 5 years VPC style constructs will be good enough?
So,
and is private cloud maybe just a way to make IT departments comfortable with the immediate term and put off some of the hard work of actually rewriting their apps?
so
The speed of light's only so fast,
Yeah.
right? So let's go back to that comment. Regulators and enterprises and countries, like some of the ones we see in Europe that restrict data to their borders, you can put so many data centers in so many places and still never solve the needs of a particular industry or a particular region or geography that you need to have access to. So I do think that there's a very long-term demand for private cloud, as long as it feels like an enterprise is using one cloud, right? I'll use the Highlander example. There can be only one, right? An enterprise user needs to feel like they're using one cloud. Platforms like RightScale help make that real with a single pane of glass view to it. But yeah, my opinion, private cloud is not going anywhere. It's not a transitional step. It is part of the journey that people kind of took backwards to get there, but it's here to stay.
And so rules, laws, priorities, and arrogance mean that both of these will exist in perpetuity. And the reason I say that is today, and part of it is you have to reshape your thinking. Do you have an intranet or an internet? Right? You have the net. Do you know where your stuff's hosted? Most likely some of you guys do because of the roles you play, but I can tell you as the dumb marketing guy, I have no idea. Right? When I go in and do my hire form, I don't know that it's a SaaS-based service or something that we've run internally, and I really don't care. IT's role in the future is to become that service broker and create the net to create the cloud. And the cloud might be running in Rackspace, might be running in your data center, might be on Amazon, and your users shouldn't care as long as the service is available. They're able to get the tools and support that they need, and they're successful in their day-to-day lives. Because you know what? If you have users going out trying to figure out how to compile things or rescript this or rescript that, your users are focusing on things that are not improving your business.
Well, it's a good thing there's nobody in our companies who don't focus on making profit for our company every day. Other questions?
Wow. Shy group.
I think cocktails are calling.
Hi. This is more of a IT perspective where IT is being responsible for, maybe I should ask this question earlier with Microsoft guys here, where traditional licensing, have you ever experienced any situations or encounters where traditional licensing prevents you or prevents a company from going to the cloud?
Are you focusing on software licensing, you mean?
Correct.
Okay, so commercial applications going into the apps.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's a
moving
good question.
between physical servers and VMs sometimes affects licensing. I have a huge impact to the IT department.
I have an answer to that some of you in the crowd may not like, which is that most companies that are really embracing cloud in a serious way are looking at replacing those restrictive applications as fast as they can with things that are cloudy, that can actually take advantage of this new environment. Most of the applications you're describing, my guess is, were built to be big monolithic applications that don't fit the model of IT they actually want to move to. And they're looking at open alternatives, they're looking at building their own things with open frameworks. Having said all of that, get off my soapbox for a second, I do think that there's some shift in thinking that I've seen even just over the past 6 months over how licensing should be done in some of those platforms that you're probably talking about. So my guess is you'll see more things that look more attractive in the cloud over the next year, 18 months. But for right now, it's still a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to this, right? The cloud doesn't replace everything, right? There's many of you who are still running mainframes or what have you. I think it's finding the right opportunity to make the change and move forward. With regards to classic legacy software that has restrictions around licensing and stuff, that's not a problem in the cloud. That problem started back when virtualization came around. So it's a long-standing problem that some big companies have taken a very long time to fix. The cloud is accelerating it because what's happening is they're now seeing that they can outsource collaboration. They can outsource email, right? So in those cases, the Microsofts realizing that the market is cannibalizing them, they've now come and said, it's better for me to cannibalize myself than the market to cannibalize it. So they're forced into some of this change. So I think in the next, couple of years, you're going to see more flexibility with this stuff. We know the licensing exists because service providers can already deliver many of them as services. It's just opening it up and making it available to the enterprise, and the industry is getting there.
Yeah, I think a lot of this also has to do with what kind of pressure is the commercial ISV feeling to have to move it over. I know that obviously the open source alternatives and the threat of being replaced entirely is a pretty good one, but it also requires all of us to force these commercial vendors to do this. I know in my own company, Oracle refused to support us virtualizing some of their workloads, so we just virtualized them anyway. And we went back over to Oracle and said, you've got 6 months to support this, or we're rewriting it, and we're going to move it to another application. Now, sadly, we couldn't rewrite it, but you got to try something here. Other questions?
I'll just add one more thing to that. I think that companies are tired of their business strategy and velocity being held hostage by someone else's roadmap. And it's one of the reasons that all the open technologies we're seeing in the hardware, infrastructure, cloud space are really so attractive in that I've waited 18 months and my vendor shows up with their new pitch because my old stuff is end of life, and now I have to buy this if I want to do what my competitors were doing 6 months ago. Great. Well, all of that is changing, and it's in the business software side as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. Next question? I think we had one over here. Did it go away?
Don't be shy.
Well, so I'll have a question for you, James.
Uh-oh.
Right? That's always fun. If no one else is going to ask a question, I'll ask the question. So, you see this every day. You get inquiries from enterprises that are probably asking, not what are the leading technologies, but how do I go about approaching the cloud? What should I be thinking about? Should I go private? Should I go public? Et cetera. How do you answer that?
Well, I actually answer it a lot of the ways that you've been talking about here. Talk to those people who are actually using cloud. Understand what their use case is and their business case, and then plan backwards from there. If you can match that value proposition, figure out a way to deliver that. If you can't match it, let it happen. I think one of the things that I always talk to customers about, I can't tell you how many enterprises tell me, well, we're not using cloud. That is such crap.
Look at your MX statement.
Yeah, grab any employee's phone and look at the apps. You'll find Dropbox, you'll find Evernote, you'll find Salesforce, you'll find all these other applications. If any of those exist, your company's already in the cloud. The question really is, what are you doing about it? And if you're an operations team, you're ultimately going to be held responsible for whether the company meets its compliance standards, whether it protects its data, whether it can recover its services, and whether or not it's going to be able to survive this type of technological change. So you can sort of sit back and say, well, I'll wait until we're hybrid, too late. I'll wait until we're using the cloud, too late. Or you can say, what do I need to proactively do to engage? And the first thing you can do is talk to those who are using the cloud and not say, please stop, but say, please teach me why and how.
Exactly. And so that is the core nugget, right? The reality is it's not about what's my cloud strategy. It's what's my user strategy. Your users are already in the cloud. Go figure out how you can basically embrace that with the corporate policies and everything else that you have to set up the right risk-reward model for your business.
I mean, the reason they're using all of those technologies and products is because they're actually trying to do their job, and they're trying to move faster than what you're giving them allows, right? And so that mindset of my whole goal here should be to move faster. What are my people doing? Why are they doing it? And how can I do it at a scalable, supportable, compliant way, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for being such an active panel and participation here. Thanks to all of you for your participation as well.